The satisfying crack of Dorothea Ashford's palm echoed across the dining room. 40 guests, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet that stopped mid-note. "You ungrateful, barren little
There it is,
nobody,"
the missing
she
link.
hissed at her daughter-in-law.
The Argentinian number.
Vivian stood there, cheek burning, eyes stinging, while her husband wrapped his arm around his pregnant mistress and smiled. No one at that table moved. No one said a word. 40 people watched a woman get slapped and did nothing. But here is what none of them knew. 2 hours before that dinner, Vivian had signed an $18 billion contract with the United States Department of Defense. She was not a quiet little housewife. She was one of the most powerful women in America, and she had been hiding in plain sight for 3 years. The Ashfords thought they married their son to a nobody. They thought she was weak. They thought she had nothing. They were about to discover how wrong they were. And by the time the truth came out, it would be far too late to undo the damage they had done to themselves. This is the story of a woman who was slapped in front of 40 people, and how she brought an empire to its knees without ever raising her voice. Lesson and value. This story carries a simple but powerful truth. Your silence is not weakness.
Your patience is not surrender. Sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is walk out of a room quietly and let time reveal what words never could. Your worth does not depend on who sees it. It exists whether they acknowledge it or not. If this story touched something in you, if you felt that fire in your chest, you are not alone. Thousands of women listen to these stories every week and find strength in them. If you are one of us, tap that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story.
Leave a comment and tell me, have you ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better? I read every single comment, and your story matters just as much as Vivian's. Hit that like button. Share this with a friend who needs to hear it today. And I will see you in the next one.
You ungrateful, barren little nobody. The words hit before the hand did. Vivian Ashford stood in the center of the dining room. 40 guests, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet playing Vivaldi in the corner. The smell of roasted lamb and fresh lilies filled the air. Dorothea Ashford rose from the head of the table. Her emerald ring caught the candlelight as she pushed back her chair. The wood scraped against marble. Everyone heard it. "Grant has wonderful news," Dottie said. Her voice carried the way it always did, like a woman who had never been interrupted in her life. Grant stood. He adjusted his tie, navy silk, the one Vivian had bought him for their anniversary. He placed his arm around a young woman Vivian had never seen before, blonde, 20-something, a cream-colored dress stretched over a visible belly. "Everyone," Grant said. He cleared his throat. "This is Lacey Barton. She is carrying the Ashford heir." The string quartet stopped. Not because anyone told them to, because the cellist's bow slipped. Vivian's sparkling water trembled in her hand. The bubbles rose and popped against the glass rim. She looked at Grant. He looked at the chandelier, at the table, at Lacey's belly, anywhere but at his wife. 40 people stared, forks frozen mid-air, napkins clutched in laps. The silence was so complete that Vivian could hear the ice shifting in the water pitcher 6 seats away. Dottie walked toward her, heels clicking on marble. Click, click, click. Each step deliberate, each step a performance. "You had your chance," Dottie said. She stopped 3 feet from Vivian, close enough for Vivian to smell her perfume, lavender. Always lavender. 3 years, nothing. Not even capable of the one thing a wife should do. Vivian opened her mouth. She wanted to say something, anything, but Dottie's hand moved faster than her words. The slap cracked across the dining room like a gunshot. No one moved. Not one person at that table. The silence was deafening. The air was thick with tension. The room was a prison of silence. The only sound was the ticking of the clock. The only light was the glow of the computer screen. The only movement was the trembling of the hands. The only hope was the hope of escape. The only truth was the truth of despair. The only life was the life of fear. The only love was the love of hate. The only joy was the joy of pain. The only peace was the peace of war. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. The only life was the life of death. The only hope was the hope of death. No one moved. Not one person at that table stood up. Not one person said a word. Lacey placed her hand on her belly. She smiled, a small, careful smile, the kind that pretended to be shy, but was anything but. Vivian's cheek burned. She could feel her heartbeat in her skin. The heat spread from her jaw to her temple. She tasted copper. She must have bitten the inside of her lip. Her inner voice spoke first, before her mouth could. I built a company worth more than this entire family. I signed an $18 billion contract 2 hours ago, and this woman just slapped me in front of 40 witnesses. What no one at that table knew, what Grant had never bothered to learn, what the Ashford family had never cared enough to discover. Vivian Kessler. Ashford was the founder and CEO of Kessler Biotech. 2 hours before this dinner, she had signed the largest biotech defense contract in American history, $18 billion, with the United States Department of Defense, for medical technology that would save soldiers' lives on battlefields across the world. She had built it from nothing. After her father died, after her mother's cancer, after every investor who said a 22-year-old woman had no business running a biotech company, she married Grant under her corporate structure. Her maiden name on every document that mattered. The Ashfords never looked. They never asked. They assumed she was a mid-level researcher with a modest inheritance. Because that is what people like the Ashfords do. They see what confirms their assumptions, and they ignore everything else. Vivian touched her cheek, felt the heat, looked at each face in the room. 40 faces. 40 people who watched a woman get slapped and did nothing. She picked up her clutch from the back of her chair. Black leather. Simple. The kind of bag that costs $4,000, but looks like it costs 40. She walked out without a word. The November air hit her face as she stepped onto the porch. Cold. Clean. The kind of cold that makes your eyes water. Or maybe that was something else. She sat in her car, engine off, hands on the steering wheel. The leather was still warm from the drive over. The seat warmer hummed against her back. She could hear the party resuming inside. Laughter. Someone had made a joke. Life was continuing in there. Her old life. She counted to 10, got to 4, started over, got to 6, started over again. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. She looked at the screen. Colton Drake, her CFO, her business partner, the one person in the world who knew exactly who she was. The message read, "Contract is fully executed. Congratulations, V. You just changed the world." She stared at the message. Then at the house. Golden light poured from every window. The Ashford estate looked like a painting. Perfect on the outside, rotting within. She looked at her own reflection in the rear-view mirror. The red handprint on her cheek glowed under the porch light. 5 distinct fingers. Dottie's emerald ring had left a small cut near her cheekbone, a thin line of blood, like a signature. She unlocked her phone, stared at Grant's contact photo. Their wedding day, his arm around her waist, both of them laughing. She remembered that moment. The photographer had said something funny. She could not remember what. She locked the phone, unlocked it, locked it again, put it face down on the passenger seat, picked it up again. Stop it. You are not going to fall apart in a driveway. She started the car. The engine was quiet. A Mercedes, the one she bought herself after the first round of funding. Grant thought her company provided it. He never asked which company. He never asked anything. She pulled out of the driveway. The gravel crunched under the tires. In the rearview mirror, the Ashford estate grew smaller. The golden windows shrank to pinpoints, then nothing. But the slap was not the worst thing that happened that night, not even close. Because while Vivian drove toward Manhattan with a handprint burning on her face, Grant Ashford sat at the head of his mother's table and accepted congratulations for his pregnant mistress. And somewhere, in the cloud backup of his shared tablet, a file was waiting. A file that would unravel everything. The night was just beginning. The elevator doors opened on the 32nd floor. Vivian stepped into the penthouse, her penthouse, the one Grant did not know about. She kept it under the company's name, Kessler Holdings, Suite 3210. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the East River. The city lights reflected off the water like scattered diamonds. She dropped her clutch on the kitchen counter. The marble was cold under her fingers. She stood there for a moment, just breathing. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. The city murmured 32 floors below. She called Margot. Margot Kinsley answered on the second ring. "Tell me he did not do what I think he did." "His mother slapped me," Vivian said, "in front of 40 people, and his pregnant mistress." Silence on the line. Then Margot said a word that Vivian would not repeat. Then another one. "I am coming over," Margot said. "Do not move." Margot arrived in 43 minutes. She brought a bottle of red wine for herself and ginger tea for Vivian. She set both on the counter, opened the wine, poured a glass, took a long sip. Then she looked at Vivian's cheek. "That is going to bruise," Margot said. "I know." "Did anyone intervene?" "No." 40 people? 40 people. Margot took another sip. "Honey, I have been biting my tongue for 3 years. That family is a sinking ship dressed in Hermes." Vivian sat on the sofa, kicked off her heels. The silk of her navy dress was wrinkled where she had gripped her own legs in the car. She had not even noticed. "Tell me everything," Margot said. "Start from the beginning." So Vivian told her about Grant's announcement, about Lacey's belly, about Dottie's words, about the slap, about the silence that followed. And as she spoke, the memories came flooding. She met Grant at a charity gala 3.5 years ago, the Kessler Foundation's annual fundraiser for veterans' medical care. He was charming, self-deprecating, funny in a way that did not try too hard. He spilled champagne on his own shoe and laughed about it. She liked that. She liked that he did not seem to care about appearances. She was building her company in stealth mode then, deliberately low profile. No press, no social media, no Forbes lists. She wore simple clothes, drove a modest car, lived in a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, not because she had to, because she wanted to know who would love her without the money. Grant never asked about her work. She told him she was in biotech research. He nodded, changed the subject. She thought it was humility. She thought he respected her independence. It was indifference. She understood that now. The wedding was beautiful and hollow. Dottie insisted on controlling every detail. The flowers, the menu, the guest list. Vivian's college friends were cut. "Not our circle, dear," Dottie had said. "You understand." Vivian had not understood, but she had smiled and nodded and let it go. The honeymoon in Tuscany lasted 4 days instead of 10. Grant received a business emergency and flew back to New York. Vivian stayed in the villa alone. She walked through vineyards. She ate pasta by herself at a table set for 2. She told herself it was just the pressures of his career. Now she counted backward. 4 days. The honeymoon was cut short 4 days in. Lacey was 5 months pregnant. The math was not complicated. "Margot," Vivian said quietly. The affair started before the wedding. Margot set down her wine glass. "Are you sure?" 5 months pregnant. We have been married 3 years, but the honeymoon, the golf weekends, the new cologne, the gym membership I never saw results from." She paused. It was always her. She pulled out her laptop, opened their shared credit card statements. Her fingers moved across the keyboard. She was a scientist before she was a CEO. Data was her first language. The evidence assembled itself like a chemical formula. Dinners for 2 at restaurants she had never been to. On nights he said he was working late. A jewelry purchase from Tiffany's, $3,200. She never received jewelry. Hotel charges in Stamford, every other Thursday. For 18 months. He was not even creative about it, Vivian said. Every other Thursday, like a subscription. Margot looked at the screen. That is not all you are going to find. She was right. Because deeper in the statements, past the dinners and the hotels and the jewelry, there was a charge that changed everything. A payment to a private investigation firm. $12,000. Paid quarterly. For 2 years, the Ashfords had been investigating her. For months before the wedding, and every month since. Why would they investigate their own daughter-in-law? Vivian asked. Margot leaned forward, her wine forgotten. Because they were not investigating their daughter-in-law. They were investigating your assets. The laptop screen glowed blue in the dark apartment. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere on the east side. The sound rose and faded. rose and faded, like a heartbeat slowing down. Vivian stared at the numbers, the dates, the pattern. Everything she thought she knew about her marriage was rearranging itself, like a molecule, splitting apart and reforming into something toxic. "I am not crazy," she said. Her voice was steady, almost too steady. The signs were all there, every single one. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself successful marriages require trust, but trust requires honesty, and he never gave me that. Not once, not from the very beginning. Margot reached across the sofa and took her hand. "What do you want to do?" Vivian, don't close the laptop. "I want to know what they were looking for." Because the credit card statements revealed more than the affair. They revealed where the Ashford money had actually been going, and it was not going where anyone thought. The private investigator's name was on the statement. The firm was in Hartford. And their reports, every single one of them, had been uploaded to a cloud account that Grant had foolishly synced to their shared tablet. The tablet sat on the kitchen counter, right next to Margot's wine. "Hand me that tablet," Vivian said. The tablet unlocked with Vivian's thumbprint. Grant had added her biometrics during their first year of marriage, back when he still pretended to share things. She opened the cloud storage. The folders were organized with the kind of precision that Grant never applied to anything else in his life. Someone else had set this up. Someone meticulous. Someone like Dottie. The folder was labeled Project Legacy. Inside were 14 files, each one a report from the private investigation firm. Each one focused on the same subject: Vivian Kessler, her father's estate, her inheritance, her company. The first report was dated 6 months before Grant approached her at the charity gala. 6 months before they ever met. The Ashfords had identified her as a target before the first glass of champagne, before the first smile, before the spilled champagne on his shoe that she thought was so endearing. Margot read over her shoulder. Neither of them spoke. The reports detailed everything: her father's biotech patents, the early valuation of Kessler Biotech, her property holdings, her investment portfolio, even the trust her father had established before his death. But it was the margin notes that destroyed her. Handwritten, scanned and uploaded in Dottie's unmistakable script. The same elegant cursive that signed Christmas cards and charity invitations. On the page about Vivian's property, assess, transfer, feasibility, post-marriage. On the page about her company, encourage joint ventures, merge assets under Ashford Holdings. On the page about her father's trust, get her to co-sign the refinance. Make it romantic. Make it romantic. 3 words, written in perfect penmanship, by a woman who had just slapped her across the face. Vivian's hands went cold, not shaking. Cold, the kind of cold that starts in the fingertips and moves inward, like her body was shutting down non-essential systems, conserving energy for what mattered. The entire marriage was a financial extraction scheme, Margot said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Vivian scrolled to the final report. Dated 2 months ago. This one was different. It included a financial assessment of the Ashford family itself. The Ashford real estate empire was collapsing. Russell Ashford had been hiding losses for 6 years. Development projects that never broke ground. Loans refinanced on top of loans. Investors promised returns that never materialized. The family owed $87 million to creditors, banks, and private investors. They were not rich. They were drowning. And they had married Grant to Vivian because they thought she was their lifeboat. The irony was almost beautiful. They targeted her for her father's modest inheritance, a few $1 million, maybe 10. They had no idea about the company, no idea about the contracts, No idea that the quiet woman in the navy dress was worth more than their entire crumbling empire, because they never asked. They never looked beyond their own assumptions. Vivienne was a woman. Therefore, she was secondary. Her work was a little hobby. Her income was supplemental. Her value was measured in fertility, and when she failed to produce an heir, she became worthless to them. Every good memory is a lie. The thought hit her like a second slap. The surprise trip to Napa. Grant had been so sweet, so spontaneous, except it was not spontaneous. He needed her signature on refinancing documents. He had her sign them on the balcony of the hotel. Just some paperwork for the house, babe. She signed without reading, because she trusted him. The birthday party he threw for her 40th. Wait, her 33rd. She had just turned 33. Dottie insisted on hosting, insisted on a formal dress, insisted Vivienne wear her good jewelry. At the time, Vivienne thought Dottie was finally warming to her. But the photographs from that night. Dottie had photographed every piece of jewelry Vivienne owned. Close-up shots, like an appraiser, the sweet way Grant would ask about her little company every few weeks. How is the research going? Any new developments? She thought he was making an effort. He was gathering intelligence. He never loved me. He loved the idea of what I could provide. And when I did not provide it fast enough, he found someone who could give him the one thing his mother wanted, an heir. She closed the tablet, set it face down on the counter. The screen left a warm rectangle on the cool marble. I need a minute, she said. She walked to the bathroom, turned on the shower. The water hit the tile with a steady hiss. Steam filled the room within seconds. She sat on the floor, fully dressed, navy silk dress against white tile. The water ran behind her. She did not get in. The tiles were cold under her palms. The steam was warm on her face. Two temperatures at once. That is what her life felt like. Two realities, the marriage she thought she had, and the marriage that actually existed. She did not cry. She breathed, in through the nose, 4 counts, out through the mouth, 7 counts. She had learned this from a therapist after her father died. The therapist said it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Vivienne did not care about the science right now. She cared about not breaking. She stayed on that floor for 11 minutes. She knew because the bathroom clock was visible from where she sat. 11 minutes of steam and cold tile, and the sound of water hitting a nothing. When she came back out, Margot had made more tea. The apartment smelled like ginger and lemon. Small mercies. There is one more thing, Vivienne said. She opened the tablet again, scrolled to the last page of the final report. The PI had included a supplementary investigation, a name Vivienne had not seen in 15 years, Wes Kinnear, her father's former business partner, the man who disappeared after her father died. The man she assumed had died too, or moved away, or simply vanished the way people do when grief makes the world too small. The report said Wes Kinnear was alive, living in a small town outside Hartford, managing something the report described as a secondary fiduciary instrument linked to the Kessler estate. Vivienne read the sentence 3 times. A secondary fiduciary instrument, she said out loud. Margot leaned in. A trust, a hidden trust. My father created a trust I did not know about. It appears so, and the Ashfords found out about it before you did. The PI report contained one final page, a valuation estimate for the hidden trust, $400 million. Vivienne sat very still. The steam from her tea curled upward. The city hummed outside. Somewhere far below, a taxi honked. The sound was thin and distant, like it belonged to another world. Her father had protected her from beyond the grave, and the Ashfords had been trying to steal that protection. Colton arranged the meeting. He always knew the right people, the right channels, the quiet ways to find someone who did not want to be found. Wes Kinnear agreed to meet at a diner in Hartford. Not a restaurant, a diner, the kind with red vinyl booths and laminated menus and coffee that tastes like it was brewed during the previous administration. Vivian drove alone. 2 hours on the highway. The November trees were bare. Skeletal branches against a gray sky. The road was wet from overnight rain. Her windshield wipers kept a steady rhythm. Back and forth, back and forth. She found the diner off the highway, a neon sign that read Patsy's in faded pink letters. The P flickered. She parked, sat in the car for 3 minutes, checked her reflection. The bruise on her cheek had turned purple overnight. She covered it with concealer. It still showed. Wes was already inside, booth in the back corner, facing the door. He was older than she expected. 62 now, she calculated. Gray hair, weathered hands, a flannel shirt, and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He stood when she approached. His eyes went to her cheek. He did not ask. "Vivian," he said. His voice cracked on the second syllable. "You look just like your father." She sat across from him, ordered black coffee. He had already finished 2 cups. The waitress called him Hun and refilled without asking. "Wes," Vivian said. "I need you to tell me about the trust." He nodded, slowly, like a man who had been rehearsing this conversation for 15 years. "Your father created it 8 months before he died," Wes said. "He knew the cancer was terminal. He had maybe a year, and he was worried about you." "Worried about what?" "About exactly what happened." Wes looked at his coffee. The surface trembled slightly. His hands were not steady. He used to say, "People will come for your money before they come for your heart." He wanted to make sure that if someone ever targeted you, if someone married you for your wealth, there would be a safety net they could not reach. The trust was structured with a specific activation clause. It could only be accessed if Vivian was in a position of personal crisis caused by a spouse or domestic partner. The language was precise, legal, drafted by the best trust attorneys in Connecticut. $400 million, sitting in a protected trust for 15 years, managed by Wes, invested conservatively, growing quietly, waiting for a day that Vivian's father prayed would never come. "He predicted this?" Vivian asked. "He was a brilliant man," Wes said. "But he did not predict this specifically. He predicted the possibility. He said to me, 'Wes, my daughter is going to be wealthy, and wealthy women attract a certain kind of man, the kind who smiles first and takes later.'" The coffee was bitter. Vivian drank it anyway. "Why did you disappear?" she asked. Wes looked away. Through the window, the parking lot was nearly empty. A semi-truck rumbled past on the highway. "Your father asked me to. He said if I stayed visible, anyone investigating the estate would find the trust. He wanted it invisible. So I moved, changed my routine, kept the trust accounts under a management company with no visible connection to the Kessler name. For 15 years. For 15 years. He met her eyes. "I am sorry, Vivian. I watched from a distance. I saw you build the company. I saw you get married. I wanted to call 100 times. But your father's instructions were clear. Do not contact Vivian unless she contacts you first." Vivian wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. The ceramic was warm, cracked along one side. The diner smelled like bacon grease and maple syrup. A bell chimed as another customer walked in. Dad saw this coming. 15 years before it happened. He protected me from beyond the grave. There is something else, Wes said. He reached into a folder beside him. Manila, worn at the edges. Your father left a letter. He asked me to give it to you only if the trust was activated. He slid the envelope across the table. Vivian's full name in her father's handwriting. The ink had faded to a soft blue, but the letters were still strong, still steady. She did not open it. Not yet. She put it in her purse. She would read it when she was alone, when the world was quiet, when she could hear his voice in the words without anyone watching. They talked for another hour. Wes explained the trust details, the investment structure, the activation process. Margot would handle the legal filing. The trust would be accessible within 30 days. As Vivian stood to leave, Wes said one more thing. Your father also said something else. He said, Vivi, you are stronger than you know, but you do not have to be strong alone. Vivian nodded. She could not speak. Her throat was too tight. She drove back to Manhattan. The highway was busier now. Evening traffic. Headlights in both directions. The radio played something she did not hear. Back in her penthouse, she sat in the dark. The city glowed through the windows. She opened her father's letter. The handwriting was shaky. He must have written it near the end, but the words were clear. My dearest Vivi, if you are reading this, then the worst has happened. Someone tried to take what is yours, but they failed. Because I knew you were too strong to stay trapped. And I knew you were too kind to suspect the trap. So I built this for you. Not as a weapon, as a bridge. Use it to walk away from whoever hurt you, and walk toward the life you deserve. I love you. Always. Dad. She folded the letter, put it in her father's recipe box, the one her mother used to keep on the kitchen counter, full of handwritten cards and faded blue ink. She sat in the dark for a long time. Then she opened her laptop and she began to plan. The phone rang at 9:14 in the morning. Blocked number. Vivian almost did not answer. She had been screening calls for 3 days. Grant had called 41 times. Dottie had called twice. Russell had not called at all. She answered, Please do not hang up. The voice was young, scared, familiar. Lacey Barton. Vivian's hand tightened around the phone. The case creaked. I know you hate me, Lacey said. I deserve that. But there is something you need to see before they destroy it. Silence. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. The refrigerator hummed. I am listening, Vivian said. They agreed to meet. A coffee shop in Stamford. Neutral territory. Vivian arrived 20 minutes early. She ordered black coffee she would not drink. She sat in the back corner, facing the door. Lacey walked in at exactly 11. She was wearing sunglasses indoors, an oversized sweater that hid her belly. She moved carefully, the way someone moves when something hurts. She sat across from Vivian, mowed the sunglasses, a bruise under her left eye, fresh, dark purple, fading to green at the edges. Vivian recognized the color. She had seen it on her own face 3 days ago. He hit you, Vivian said, not a question. Lacey nodded. I suggested we slow down the pregnancy announcement. I said it was too soon. That we should wait until your divorce was finalized. She paused. He did not agree. The coffee shop was warm. Jazz played from a speaker above the counter. A mother at the next table handed her toddler a cup of Cheerios. The child spilled them immediately. The mother sighed, picked them up, one by one. How far along are you? Vivian asked. 5 months. But he told me I was the reason we could not have children. Lacey's face changed. Something cracked behind her eyes. He told me the same thing about the marriage. He said it was already over, that you were just staying for the money, that you had nowhere to go. Vivian almost laughed. The irony was so precise, it could cut glass. Lacey, she said, I have more money than his entire family combined. He just did not know. Lacey blinked, twice. Her mouth opened, closed. Then why did you stay? She asked. Vivian looked at her coffee. The surface was still, black, like a tiny dark mirror. Because I loved him, or I loved who I thought he was, and I kept hoping the person I married was real. They sat with that for a moment. The jazz played, the child babbled, the espresso machine hissed. You said you have something to show me, Vivian said. Lacey reached into her bag, a large manila envelope. She slid it across the table. Her hands were trembling. I found these in his office at the estate. In a locked drawer, I used a letter opener. She paused. I have been in that house for 2 months, living in the East Wing. Dottie calls it the guest suite. It is a cage with expensive curtains. Vivian opened the envelope. Inside were financial documents, a second set of books for Ashford Development Group, 2 columns of numbers, one labeled official, one labeled actual. The official books showed modest profits, stable investments, normal cash flow. The actual books showed something else entirely. Money cycling through shell corporations registered in Delaware, the Cayman Islands, and Cyprus. Investor funds redirected into personal accounts. Construction permits for buildings that did not exist. Revenue from properties that had never been sold. Money laundering on a scale that made $87 million in debt look like the tip of the iceberg. Russell and Grant have been doing this for at least 8 years, Lacey said. The Ashford Foundation takes donations, mostly from veterans' families and retired military officers. The money goes into the foundation, then it disappears into these shell companies and comes back out as real estate investment returns. Vivian stared at the documents. The numbers swam, not because they were complicated, because the implications were staggering. The Ashford family had been stealing from veterans' families. The same community that Vivian's biotech contract was designed to serve, the same soldiers whose lives her technology would save. Why are you showing me this? Vivian asked. Lacey looked at the table. Her hand moved to her belly, a protective gesture, unconscious, because I am 2 months pregnant with his child, and I just realized that the father of my baby is a criminal, and his mother is worse. She looked up, and because he hit me. And I do not think it was the first time he hit a woman. I think it was just the first time he hit me. Vivian studied Lacey's face. The bruise, the fear, the exhaustion. She saw herself 3 years ago, hopeful, naive, believing the Ashford smile. The hardest part is not that he lied, Vivian said. The hardest part is that I built my life around the lie and called it love. Lacey's eyes filled. She pressed her lips together, nodded. They sat in silence. The coffee shop played soft jazz. The child at the next table dropped the cup of Cheerios again. The mother sighed, picked them up, one by one. Vivian and Lacey both watched her. Something unspoken passed between them. The exhaustion of being a woman in a man's wreckage. Lacey did the thing Vivian recognized instantly. She glanced at the door, then at the window, then back at the door, checking exits, measuring distance, calculating escape. Vivian used to do the same thing. At family dinners, at Ashford gatherings. Every time Dottie raised her voice, every time Grant went quiet in that dangerous way. You are safe here, Vivian said. Lacey nodded, but her eyes checked the door one more time. The documents Lacey brought were devastating. Shell companies, fraudulent permits, stolen donations. But they were nothing compared to what Vivian's forensic team would find buried in the Ashford Foundation's tax filings. The rabbit hole went deeper than anyone imagined. Colton assembled the team in 72 hours, 3 forensic accountants, 2 former FBI financial analysts, 1 tax attorney who had prosecuted 3 Ponzi schemes in the Southern District of New York. They set up in a conference room at Kessler Biotech headquarters. Whiteboards covered in numbers, laptops humming, coffee cups accumulating like a small city skyline. Margot coordinated the legal strategy. She filed preliminary divorce documents quietly. No alerts to the Ashfords. No public records. Accessible without a specific case number. Asset protection motions sealed by the court. The forensic team worked fast. The Ashford financial structure was complicated, but not sophisticated. It was built on the assumption that no one would ever look closely. That wealth itself was sufficient camouflage. They were wrong. Within 3 days, the team unraveled the entire empire. Russell Ashford had been running a modified Ponzi scheme for nearly a decade. New investor money paid old investor returns. Development projects existed only on paper. The luxury condominiums in Westport were an empty lot. The mixed-use development in Stamford was a parking garage with a fraudulent building permit. Dottie's charitable foundation was worse. It collected donations primarily from military veterans' families and retired officers, people who gave because they believed in supporting wounded warriors, people who trusted the Ashford name. The foundation spent 11% of its revenue on actual charitable work. The remaining 89% was cycled through 3 shell companies, converted into consulting fees, and deposited into personal accounts controlled by Dottie and Russell. Grant's role was the front man. He hosted the investor dinners. He gave the presentations. He shook the hands and poured the wine and made promises about 12% annual returns that were mathematically impossible. The total exposure, debt to creditors, defrauded investors, and the Internal Revenue Service combined $312 million. And they thought marrying Grant to Vivian would solve it. Vivian stood in the conference room, looking at the whiteboard, the numbers mapped across it like a disease spreading through a body. Every line connected to another line. Every shell company feeding another shell company. A circulatory system of fraud. "They're going to prison," Colton said. He stood beside her, arms crossed. His expression was the one he wore during hostile negotiations. Calm exterior, furious interior. "Not yet," Vivian said. "We need to be strategic about this." Then the phone call came. A financial journalist from the Wall Street Journal, a woman named Rebecca Torres. She called Vivian's company for comment on what she described as the Ashford connection. Someone had leaked. Vivian did not know who. Maybe a disgruntled investor, maybe a former employee, maybe someone at the PI firm who realized they had been working for criminals. The story was running in 48 hours, and if Vivian's name appeared alongside the Ashford fraud, her $18 billion contract could be jeopardized. The Department of Defense did not do business with companies connected to financial criminals. Everything she built, every late night, every rejected grant application, every investor who said no, every patent filing, every clinical trial, every breakthrough, all of it could vanish because she married the wrong man. Vivian stood in her office at midnight. The Manhattan skyline glittered below, 52nd floor. She could see the Brooklyn Bridge, the lights of Jersey City across the river, a plane descending toward LaGuardia, its lights blinking red and white against the dark sky. She pressed her forehead against the glass. It was cold. Her breath fogged the window. She drew a small circle in the fog with her fingertip, then wiped it away. "I survived losing Dad at 21. I survived building this company from nothing. I survived every man in every boardroom who looked through me. I will not let them take this, not the company, not my dignity, not my name. She sat at her desk, opened her laptop, opened the email from for her father that she kept in a separate folder. The last email he ever sent her. She had read it 300 times. She read it again. Vivi, you are stronger than you know, but you do not have to be strong alone. She closed the email, opened a new document, and she began to type. The plan was simple, elegant, ruthless. She would not run from the story. She would become the story, on her terms. She picked up her phone, called Rebecca Torres at the Wall Street Journal. It was 12:45 in the morning. Rebecca answered. Ms. Torres, Vivian said, this is Vivian Kessler. I believe you have been looking into the Ashford family. I would like to offer you something better, an exclusive, the real story, my story. Rebecca Torres paused for exactly 2 seconds. I am listening, she said. Meanwhile, at the Ashford estate in Greenwich, Grant paced the library. He had called Vivian 41 times. She had not answered once. She is overreacting, he told his mother. She always does this. Makes everything about herself. Dottie sat in her armchair. The one with the green velvet upholstery. She held a glass of scotch, not her first. She should be grateful we accepted her into this family, Dottie said. A nobody from nowhere, with her little science experiments. I will call her again tomorrow, Grant said. She will come around. She always does. He was wrong. She would not come around. Not this time. Not ever again. Vivian made a decision that night that would put her on the front page of every newspaper in the country, and the Ashfords would not see it coming until it was too late. The article ran on a Tuesday morning, front page above the fold. Vivian Kessler, the woman behind the biggest defense contract in biotech history. Her maiden name, bold type, a photograph of her in her laboratory, white coat, steady eyes, no mention of Ashford anywhere. Rebecca Torres had done exceptional work. The article detailed Vivian's journey, the daughter of a biotech pioneer, the young woman who took over a fledgling company at 22, the breakthroughs in battlefield medicine, the $18 billion Department of Defense contract that would deploy advanced wound care technology to military hospitals and field units worldwide. The article positioned Vivian as what she was, a genius, a visionary, a self-made billionaire who chose to build in silence, while others built in noise. Vivian read the article at 6 in the morning, standing in her kitchen, coffee in hand, the sunrise turning the East River gold outside her window. She read it twice. Then she put down the coffee and closed her eyes. It did not feel like victory. It felt like the first brick being laid. A long wall, still to build. The Ashford family saw the Sally article at different times that morning. Dottie saw it first, 7:15. She was having her morning tea in the sunroom, Earl Grey, 1 sugar. The newspaper was delivered on a silver tray, as it had been every morning for 40 years. She unfolded it, saw the headline, saw the name. The teacup slipped from her fingers. It shattered on the marble floor. Tea pooled around the white porcelain shards. Russell, she called. Her voice was thin, like a wire stretched too tight. Russell, come here immediately. Russell emerged from his study. He wore the bathrobe he always wore before 9. He took the newspaper, read the headline, read the first paragraph. His face went gray. Not white, gray, the color of ash. Grant saw the article at 8:30 on his phone in Lacey's apartment, where he had been staying since Vivian stopped answering his calls. He read it standing in the kitchen, Lacey watching from the doorway. $18 billion? He said. His voice cracked. That is not possible. She is a researcher. She works in a lab. She told me she works in a lab. He called Vivian. Call number 42. No answer. He called again. 43, 44, 45. No answer. Back at the Ashford estate, Dottie and Russell sat in the library with the doors closed. Dottie's hands were shaking. Russell's face had not regained its color. We did not know, Russell said. How could we not know? Because we never looked, Dottie said. And for the first time in decades, her voice held something other than authority. It held fears. They had targeted Vivian for her father's inheritance. A few $1 million, maybe 10, enough to cover the worst of the debt, enough to keep the scheme running for another year or two. They had no idea. Not about the company, not about the valuation, not about the contract. They had married their son to one of the wealthiest women in America and spent 3 years treating her like hired help. The phone rang at the estate. Grant's number. Dottie answered. Mother, Grant said, did you see the article? Yes. What do we do? Dottie looked at Russell. Russell looked at the floor. We get her back, Dottie said. We get her back and we make this right. But Vivian was not coming back, and making it right was no longer an option available to the Ashfords. That night, alone in her penthouse, Vivian broke. Not during the crisis, not during the planning, not during the interview, after, when it was quiet, when the adrenaline stopped, when there was nothing left to do but sit with the truth. She curled up on the sofa. The city lights blurred through the windows. She pulled a blanket over her legs. It was cashmere. She had bought it with Grant, at a shop in Soho. He had said it was too expensive. She bought it anyway. Now the softness of it felt like a lie. She wanted a family. That was the thing nobody knew. She did not start a company to prove anything. She started it because her father's work mattered. But what she wanted, what she truly wanted, was a partner, a kitchen with laughter in it. Children, Sunday mornings with nowhere to be, someone who asked about her day and actually listened to the answer. She had wanted Grant to be that person. She had bent herself into shapes to fit his family's expectations. She had dimmed her light so he would not feel overshadowed. She had hidden her success because she wanted to be loved for herself, not for her net worth. And he never loved her at all, not even a little, not even for a moment. It was always the money, even though he did not know how much money it was. She called Margot at 2 a.m. Margot answered on the first ring. She always did. Did anyone ever love me? Vivian asked. Her voice was small, like a child's. Just me? Margot was silent for 3 seconds. Then she said, I do. Your dad did. And you need to start loving yourself enough to burn that bridge completely. After they hung up, Vivian went to the kitchen. 2:37 a.m. She opened her mother's recipe box, the one with the handwritten cards in faded blue ink. She found the snickerdoodle recipe, third card from the back, her mother's handwriting. Small and neat and full of love. She measured flour, cracked eggs. The butter was cold from the refrigerator. She warmed it in her hands. The dough came together slowly. She rolled it into balls, pressed each one flat, sprinkled cinnamon and sugar. The apartment filled with warmth, cinnamon and vanilla and butter. The smell of her mother's kitchen, the smell of Saturday mornings when she was 10 years old and the world was simple and safe. She did not eat a single cookie. She did not need to. She just needed to feel her mother's handwriting under her fingertips. She just needed the apartment to smell like home. I deserve a love that does not come with conditions, she said to the empty kitchen. I deserve a life that does not require me to be small. The cookies cooled on the counter. The city slept outside. Vivian washed the mixing bowls, dried them, put them away. Every motion deliberate, every motion hers. Grant showed up at her office the next morning. He did not come to apologize, he came to threaten. The lobby of Kessler Biotech was white marble and glass, clean lines, modern, the kind of space designed to communicate precision. Grant arrived at 9:17. He was wearing the charcoal suit Vivian had tailored for him at their first anniversary. The irony was not lost on her when security called up to report his arrival. He approached the front desk, shoulders squared, the posture of a man who expected doors to open for him. "I am here to see my wife," he said, loud enough for the entire lobby to hear. The receptionist, a young woman named Dana, looked at her screen, then at Grant. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" "I am her husband. I do not need an appointment." "Sir, all visitors require—" "I am her husband." His voice echoed off the marble. Two security guards moved forward, not quickly, steadily. The way trained professionals move. Vivian came down in the elevator. She had been watching on the lobby camera from her office. She took 12 seconds to decide. Then she put on her jacket, navy, tailored, the one she wore to board meetings. She walked into the lobby. Grant saw her. His expression shifted 3 times in 2 seconds. Anger to relief to calculation. "Vivian," he said, "can we talk? Please, privately." She led him to a conference room on the 3rd floor, glass walls, visible to the entire office. She chose it deliberately. Witnesses. They sat across from each other. The table between them was long, polished wood. Grant on one side, Vivian on the other, like opposing counsels. He spoke first. "You have been hiding this from me, our entire marriage. That is fraud." "Interesting choice of word," Vivian said. "Fraud. I have rights. To your assets. To your company. We are married. We're married. Past tense. The papers were filed Tuesday." His jaw tightened. The muscle below his ear pulsed. She had seen that before. Every time he was about to lose control. "You cannot just file for divorce without telling me," he said. "Actually, I can. And I did. Margot Kinsley filed on my behalf. You will be served formally within the week." "Your lawyer," he said. The word dripped with contempt. "Your friend is not a real lawyer. She is a partner at one of the top family law firms in New York," Vivian said. "She graduated first in her class at Columbia. She has a 92% success rate in high-asset divorces. But please, finish your sentence." He did not finish the sentence. "I will go public," he said instead. "I will tell everyone you defrauded me, that you hid assets during the marriage. My lawyers will—" Vivian reached under the table. She had placed a folder there before Grant arrived. She slid it across the polished wood. "Open it," she said. He opened it. The PEI report. Every page, including Dottie's margin notes. "Make it romantic." The second set of books from Ashford Development, the one Lacey provided, every fraudulent entry highlighted in yellow. Lacey's photographs, the bruise under her eye, time-stamped, a sworn affidavit from Lacey Barton detailing the assault, a preliminary report from the forensic accounting team, shell companies, money laundering, investor fraud, veterans' donations stolen, and on the last page, a copy of the IRS complaint that Margot had already filed. Grant's face went through every stage: confusion, recognition, denial, fear. "Where did you get this?" His voice was different now, quieter, thinner. "It does not matter where I got it. What matters is that the FBI will have a copy by Friday. And every journalist in the tri-state area will have a copy by Monday." Unless. She let the word sit. Unless. The most powerful word in any negotiation. Her father taught her that. You never fill the silence after unless. You let them fill it with their own fear. Grant's hands were flat on the table. She noticed they were trembling. The wedding ring was still on his finger. White gold. She had chosen it. Simple. Classic. She thought it suited him. Unless what? He asked. Sign the divorce papers, cleanly. No contest, no claims to my assets, no public statements. Walk away. And if I do not? Then this folder goes to the FBI, the IRS, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and every local news station in Connecticut. Your mother's foundation will be investigated. Your father will be arrested. You will be charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and domestic assault. She paused. Let the list settle. Your mother slapped me in front of 40 people, she added. Your mother's charity steals from veterans' families. Your mother's destruction has already begun. Grant stood up. The chair scraped against the floor. He leaned forward, palms on the table. You will regret this, he said. My mother will destroy you. Vivienne did not stand. She did not lean forward. She did not raise her voice. Your mother is a 63-year-old woman who commits fraud through a charity that steals from wounded soldiers, she said. She is not going to destroy anyone. She is going to prison. Grant left the conference room. His footsteps echoed down the hallway. Fast, almost running. 3 hours later, Vivienne received a call from an unexpected number. Brielle Ashford, Grant's younger sister, the quiet one, the one who sat at the edge of every family dinner, the one Dottie introduced as our Brielle, and then immediately talked about Grant instead. I need to talk to you, Brielle said. Her voice was steady, but thin. Like a bridge holding more weight than it was designed for. They met that afternoon. Vivienne's office. Brielle's son. Brie sat in the chair across from the desk, her knees together, her hands clasped in her lap, her eyes darting to the door every few seconds. The posture, the clasped hands, the exit check. Vivienne recognized it instantly. The same posture Lacey had in the coffee shop. The same fear response. The Ashford family created the same pattern in every woman it touched. I have watched my mother control and manipulate every person in her orbit for 30 years, Brielle said. I am done. She brought a flash drive, internal family emails, trust documents, and voice recordings, recorded on her phone over the past 2 years. Dottie's voice on the recordings was chilling, clear, precise, completely self-aware. The Kessler girl has money, not a fortune, but enough to cover the Westport losses. Grant needs to get her pregnant. A baby locks her in legally. If she signs the refinance documents, we can leverage the properties. The foundation board meets Tuesday. Make sure the quarterly report shows the adjusted numbers. Every word planned, every manipulation deliberate, every moment of Vivienne's marriage orchestrated from Dottie's armchair. Brielle asked for one thing: protection from the legal fallout. Vivienne agreed. Why now? Vivienne asked. Brielle looked at her. For the first time, she did not check the door. Because she slapped you, Brielle said, and I realized she could just as easily slap me, and no one at that table would have moved. The divorce hearing was set for Monday. Everything was in motion. The forensic report, the IRS complaint, the Wall Street Journal follow-up. But on Friday, Dottie made one final, catastrophic move. Friday afternoon, 2:45, the steps of the Greenwich Superior Courthouse. Dottie Ashford stood behind a podium she had arranged herself. 3 microphones, 2 television cameras, a cluster of print journalists. She wore Chanel, cream-colored, pearls. Her hair was done. Her makeup was perfect. She looked like a woman who had never lost control of anything in her life. "I am here today," Dottie said, "to address the vicious attacks against my family by a woman we welcomed into our home with open arms." She proceeded to describe Vivian as unstable, vindictive, and emotionally disturbed. She claimed Vivian had tricked Grant into marriage by concealing her true personality. She accused Vivian of attempting to steal Ashford family assets through a fraudulent divorce filing. She cried on cue, dabbed her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. She referenced Lacey's pregnancy. It's the natural result of Grant seeking comfort from a woman who actually cares about family. It was a masterful performance. Dottie had hired a crisis PR firm. The talking points were polished, the narrative was crafted, the tears were perfectly timed. For approximately 6 hours it worked. The headlines shifted. Billionaire wife accused of marital fraud. Cable news picked it up. Twitter exploded. The narrative was irresistible. Rich wife versus wronged mother-in-law. People chose sides without knowing a single fact. Vivian watched from her office. On 3 screens simultaneously, cable news on the left, Twitter feed in the center, news websites on the right. Colton paced behind her. "We need to respond. Now." Margot was on the phone with the court. The sealed filing was leaked. Someone at the courthouse talked. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. Vivian's personal crisis was now a corporate crisis. The stock implications, the contract, the Department of Defense relationship. Everything was in play. Vivian closed her eyes, breathed, opened them. "No," she said. "No what?" Colton asked. No public response, no press conference, no statement, no tweets. "Vivian, she is destroying you on national television. She is destroying herself. She just does not know it yet." The dignity win. She had planned for this, not this specifically, but for the possibility that Dottie would go public. Desperate people make desperate moves, and Dottie was the most desperate person in Connecticut. Vivian called one person, Rebecca Torres, the Wall Street Journal journalist who had written the first article. "Rebecca," she said, "I have something for you. Everything, and I mean everything." Vivian provided the full dossier, the PI report, the financial fraud documentation, the shell company records, Lacey Barton's sworn statement and cooperation agreement, Brielle Ashford's recordings, the forensic accounting report, the IRS complaint receipt, and one devastating detail. Dottie's charitable foundation had taken donations from military veterans' families, Gold Star families, families who lost sons and daughters in service, the same military whose soldiers would be saved by the biotech contract that Vivian had just signed. Rebecca Torres worked through the night. Her team verified every document, called every source, cross-referenced every number. The article went live at 5:45 in the morning. Saturday, front page. Above the fold, digital edition pushed to every subscriber. The Ashford deception, inside the family fraud that stole from America's veterans. The article was devastating, not because it was sensationalized, because it was meticulous. Every claim documented, every shell company traced, every dollar followed from veterans' donation checks to Dottie's personal account. And beside the article, a sidebar, Dottie's press conference from the previous day, her exact quotes. Placed next to the evidence. The contrast was surgical. Every news outlet picked it up within 2 hours. By noon, Dottie's press conference footage was being replayed on every channel. Her words, her tears, her accusations, all played against the backdrop of stolen donations and fraudulent books. The internet turned, not slowly, all at once, like a wave. Russell Ashford was arrested at the estate at 3 in the afternoon. He was in his bathrobe. He had not changed since morning. 2 FBI agents, 1 IRS criminal investigator. They walked him to a sedan in the driveway. No handcuffs. Not yet. But they would come. Grant was served with criminal fraud charges at 4:15. At Lacey's apartment, he opened the door in sweatpants. His hair was unwashed. He looked 10 years older than he had a week ago. Dottie's lawyer called Margot at 5. His voice was clipped. Professional. The kind of tone lawyers use when they know their client has already lost. "My client is prepared to discuss terms," he said. "Your client is welcome to discuss terms with the U.S. Attorney's Office," Margot replied. "This is no longer a civil matter." Vivian sat in her office. The city outside was fading into dusk. The lights were coming on across Manhattan, one by one, like the city was waking up even as the day ended. Colton knocked on the door. "It is done? Every outlet has the story. The Department of Defense called. They confirmed the contract is secure. Your name is clean." Vivian nodded. She looked at the skyline. The Brooklyn Bridge was lit up, golden cables against dark water. She went to the roof, alone. The November air was sharp. It bit at her face and her hands. She could hear the city below, garbage trucks, taxi horns, a boat horn from the river, distant, deep. The sky was turning from orange to purple. A plane climbed from LaGuardia. Its lights blinked against the darkening sky. A slow, steady rhythm. Red, white, red, white. She breathed in. The air smelled like exhaust, and cold and the river, and somewhere, faintly, like bagels from the bakery on the corner. She did not feel triumphant. She felt tired. But the tiredness felt clean, like after a long run, like after her body had done exactly what it was built to do, like every muscle had been used and now they could rest. She stood on that roof for 23 minutes. She counted. Not because it mattered, because counting was something she could control. Then she went back inside, washed her face, made a cup of tea, and prepared for Monday. The divorce hearing was set for 9 in the morning, and the judge had a reputation for punctuality. Monday morning, 9 sharp. Courtroom 4B Greenwich Superior Court. The courtroom smelled like old wood and paper and coffee from the vending machine down the hall. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a persistent, low buzz. Like a fly trapped in a window, Judge Patricia Calloway entered from her chambers. 61 years old, silver hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She had a reputation for 2 things, fairness and efficiency. "Be seated," the clerk said. Vivian sat on the left side, navy suit, white blouse, hair pulled back, Margot beside her, folder on the table, thin. Everything had already been filed. Grant sat on the right side, his lawyer, a man named Douglas Whitfield from a firm in Stamford. They had been retained 3 days ago. Not much time to prepare, but it did not matter. Grant was not contesting. His lawyer had explained it clearly. Contest the divorce, and the fraud evidence goes to trial publicly. Every detail. Every shell company. Every stolen dollar from every veteran's family, plastered across every newspaper in the country for months. Or sign, walk away, cooperate with the federal investigation, accept the consequences. Grant chose the second option. The hearing lasted 11 minutes. Margot presented the filing. Irreconcilable differences. The prenuptial agreement, which Grant's own mother had insisted upon, protected all premarital assets. Vivian's company, her properties, her trusts, were all premarital. Grant had nothing to claim. Grant's lawyer stated his client's non-contestation for the record. Douglas Whitfield spoke in a flat, professional monotone, a man doing his job without enthusiasm. Judge Calloway reviewed the documents. She asked 3 questions, all procedural, all answered by Margot. The petition for dissolution of marriage is granted, Judge Calloway said. All terms as filed. 11 minutes. 3 years of marriage dissolved in the time it takes to brew a pot of coffee. But the judge did not dismiss the court. Not yet. She removed her reading glasses, looked at Vivian, then at Grant, then back at Vivian. In 30 years, on this bench, she said, I have rarely seen such a calculated, systematic campaign of manipulation against a spouse. The evidence in this case is extraordinary, not because of the dollar amounts, but because of the deliberate, sustained effort to deceive and exploit a person within the most intimate of relationships. She paused. The courtroom was silent. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Ms. Kessler, the judge said, using Vivian's maiden name, the court recognizes your extraordinary restraint in these proceedings. I wish you well. She struck the gavel. Once. The sound was small and final. Vivian stood. Margot stood. They walked out of the courtroom together, down the hallway, through the double doors, into the November sunlight. Margot looked at her. How do you feel? Vivienne thought about it. Really thought. The sun was warm on her face. The courthouse lawn was green despite the season. A squirrel ran across the path carrying an acorn. Quick, purposeful, certain of its destination. Free, she said. I feel free. The weeks that followed moved differently. Time no longer felt compressed. It expanded, breathed. There was space in it again. Vivian returned to her company. The contract implementation was ahead of schedule. Her engineering team had solved a critical challenge in the field deployment system. The first units would ship to military hospitals within 6 months. She received letters from soldiers' families, from veterans' organizations, from young women in biotech who had read the Wall Street Journal article, handwritten letters, emails, cards. One letter was from a mother in Texas. Her son was a Marine. He had been injured by an IED 3 years ago. The current field medicine had saved his life, but the new technology Vivian developed would have saved his leg too. Thank you, the mother wrote, for caring about the ones who serve. Vivian kept that letter in her father's recipe box, beside his last email, beside her mother's snickerdoodle recipe, a collection of love from people who meant it. Lacey's baby was born in February. A girl, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, healthy, strong lungs. The nurses said she cried with conviction. Vivian sent a gift, a college fund, anonymous, deposited into a trust Margot established, no name attached, no return address. Margot thought she was insane. You are funding the child of the woman who helped destroy your marriage. That child did not choose her father, Vivian said. And that mother is 28 years old and about to raise a daughter alone because she was brave enough to tell the truth. Margot shook her head, but she set up the trust. Brielle Ashford left the family, officially, completely. She changed her last name to Prewitt, her grandmother's maiden name. She found a job at a nonprofit in Hartford that provided legal aid to domestic abuse survivors. She and Vivian had lunch once a month, at the same diner where Vivian had met Wes, the one with the red vinyl booths and the flickering neon sign. They ordered coffee. They talked about work and books and the weather. They never talked about Grant. Dottie Ashford went to trial in April. The courtroom was mostly empty. A few journalists. No friends. No supporters. No allies. 40 people had watched her slap Vivian at that dinner. Not one of them came to support her now. She wore Chanel to her sentencing, cream-colored, pearls. Her hair was done. Her makeup was perfect. Even at the end, she looked like a woman who controlled everything. Judge Morrison gave her 4 years, federal minimum security, for wire fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Dottie stood when the sentence was read. She did not cry. She did not speak. She adjusted her pearls, and she walked out with the marshals flanking her. Her heels clicked on the marble. Click, click, click. Grant pleaded guilty to 3 counts of financial fraud. His cooperation with the federal investigation reduced his sentence to 2 years. He stood in the courtroom in a blue suit that did not fit quite right. He had lost weight. His eyes were hollow. He looked at Vivian. She was sitting in the gallery. Not because she needed to be there, because she needed to see it end. He looked at her for 5 full seconds. His mouth opened slightly, like he wanted to say something, but there were no words left. Nothing he could say that would matter. Nothing that would undo 3 years of calculated deception. Vivian did not look back. She looked at the judge, at the flag behind the bench, at the seal of the court on the wall, at anything except the man she used to love. When the marshals led Grant away, she stood, walked out, down the hallway, through the doors, into the sunlight. Margot was waiting by the car. Done? Done. 6 months after the divorce, a Tuesday in May, Vivian stood in her new office. The expansion had required a full floor renovation. Larger, brighter, windows on 3 sides. The lab was 2 floors below. She could hear the centrifuges humming through the floor if she stood very still. The Forbes interview team arrived at 10. A photographer, a writer, an assistant carrying equipment. They were there for the annual feature, America's Most Innovative Leaders. Colton knocked on the doorframe. "They are ready for you." Vivian stood, straightened her jacket, navy, tailored, her signature. She caught her reflection in the glass partition. Clear eyes, steady posture, no bruises, no pretending, no making herself small to fit someone else's expectations. Dad was right. I was stronger than I knew. But the real strength was not building the company. It was walking out of that dining room. It was sitting in that car and choosing myself. It was learning that the prison door had been unlocked all along. I had been my own warden, not because I was weak, because I loved someone enough to build walls around myself and call them home. She walked toward the interview team, shook hands, smiled. Not the careful smile she used to wear at Ashford dinners, a real one, the kind that starts in the chest and works its way up. The interview lasted 90 minutes. She talked about the technology, the soldiers it would help, the future of battlefield medicine. She talked about her father, his vision, his legacy. She did not talk about Grant, or Dottie, or the Ashfords, not because she was hiding, because they were no longer part of her story. That evening she drove home, not to Greenwich, not to the penthouse, to a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights she had purchased the month before. 3 stories, a garden in the back, a kitchen with a window that looked out onto a magnolia tree. The tree was blooming, white petals against a blue sky. She drove through Greenwich on the way, the long route. She did not need to. She chose to. The Ashford estate appeared on her left, the stone walls, the iron gate, the long driveway lined with maples, and on the gate, a sign she had never seen before. For sale. She did not slow down. She did not glance. She did not feel the pull of anger or sadness or satisfaction. She felt nothing about that house. It was just a building, stone and wood and glass. The people who made it dangerous were gone. She turned up the radio. A song came on, something with a piano and a soft voice. The kind of song her mother used to hum while cooking. while rolling dough, while wiping flour from the counter with a dish towel. Vivian hummed along. She did not know all the words. She hummed the melody. The notes rose and fell. Her windows were down. May air, warm, carrying the smell of cut grass, and rain that had not yet arrived. Her hands were steady on the wheel. Her cheek was smooth. No bruises, no handprint, no signature of someone else's cruelty. The road ahead was long and open. The magnolia tree was blooming in her new garden. The recipe box sat on her new kitchen counter. The letters from soldiers' families were inside. Her father's email, her mother's snickerdoodle recipe, and a handwritten letter from a man who loved her before she was born and protected her after he died. She drove toward Brooklyn, toward the brownstone, toward the magnolia tree, toward the kitchen that smelled like home, and for the first time in years she was not driving toward someone else's destination. The road was hers. Closing. Disclaimer. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our creative team to deliver meaningful stories with real emotional value. All characters, names, and events are entirely fictional. Any resemblance to real persons or situations is purely coincidental. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being part of this community.